Hey everyone, Doc T here with another episode of the Horses Advocate podcast. Today I want to talk about carbohydrate dependency, which is a simple word. If you Google it, you'll see a lot of things talking about in human nature, but when it comes to horses, nobody's talking about it at all. So carbohydrate dependency basically means feeding a sugar-based diet year-round. And what's wrong with this is very simple. If you look at nature in general, we have an ebb and flow in most of the world. Maybe not in the tropics along the equator, but most other places we have seasons. And during the abundant seasons of late summer, early fall, we have a bountiful harvest of good foods that are loaded with sugar, mainly fruits and vegetables for humans. And for horses, you have lush pasture. And that's going to be high in sugar content. And the purpose of that is to add sugar to our diets, which is converted into body fat because it's a very poor fuel, sugar is, or glucose specifically. And so our cells become a little bit tired and we start to borderline on insulin resistance as the mitochondria start to become exhausted and the sugar is put into our body fat. But what happens is when winter comes, there is no more sugar out there. There's no more lush grass. It's all dormant grass. They're not producing glucose anymore or starch. So now the horse is on a more austere diet of dormant hay, dormant grass, I should say, and hopefully some pretty meager hay. If you go back hundreds of years ago, there wasn't even hay available. That's a relatively new idea in horse care. So during the winter, they start to live on cellulose, and cellulose is the other part of grass and other plants out there that the horse eats that is glucose. It's been converted into cellulose. So let me just stop for a second, because this may get confusing. Starch is when photosynthesis occurs and the plant makes a molecule of sugar called glucose. And that glucose is made out of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And the glucose is put together in a chain. So if you look at my hand as a molecule of glucose, you see a glucose, then another glucose, then another glucose, then another glucose, and a whole chain of glucoses strung together. And that's what's called starch. And that's how plants store their sugar. You and I store our sugar as glycogen, so glycogen is how animals store it. But plants store it as starch. Now, when the sun goes down, they're going to convert that starch into another molecule called cellulose. And they do this by taking every other molecule of glucose and turning it upside down. So it's right side up and upside down, right side up, upside down, right side up, upside down. And that conversion is what cellulose is. And it creates structural carbohydrates, and that's what causes the grass to grow overnight, so to speak. So grasses and plants grow overnight by converting stored sugar in the form of starch into cellulose, which is every other glucose molecule is upside down. Now, every animal on the planet, including your pet earthworms, can take sugar or starch and break it down into sugar, glucose, and feed our bodies. And that's what we do. We keep feeding all the starch to us, and the sugar is broken down as a poor fuel, and at some point it's converted into triglycerides and stored as body fat. But what's interesting is cellulose is not digestible by any animal on the planet, including your pet earthworms. So you can't do that. But the gut microbes in the colon, in the large bowel of the horse, and in yours, can digest cellulose into short chain fatty acids. And that is exactly what it means, fat. That's stored as either triglycerides or it's converted into ketones in the liver. And the ketones is a much better fuel for your cells. So you have two fuels for your cell: glucose, which gives you about 2 units of energy, and cellulose, which is converted into small short chain fatty acids, ketones, and gives you 20 to 28 times more energy with no free radicals, no pollution. So fat is a much better burning fuel. It's like high test gasoline for your car, or the best fuel that you can possibly get. And so when a horse is in winter, it's going to start eating dormant foods, these dormant grasses. And it's the dormant grasses that are high in cellulose, low in starch, and that plant provides more energy with no free radicals. What that does is it gives a break to the engines inside each cell, the engines being the mitochondria. And the mitochondria actually start to rebuild and strengthen into what we call plump up. So they're ready for the onslaught of sugar that comes in summer and fall again. And that's the natural ebb and flow of high sugar to low sugar diets. It's exactly what bears do. They eat like crazy, they get fat, then they go in a cave, they just stop eating completely. And they start using their body fat. They start to get thin, lose their body fat, but they preserve their muscle, and that's the most important thing. But in carbohydrate dependency, that's when you take in sugar or feed your horse sugar every day. And so they never get that break. The cells never get a chance to rest, to recuperate, to make their mitochondria stronger and healthier. So year after year after year of giving this carbohydrate on a daily basis in the form of grain, the mitochondria become exhausted and the cell starts to die. And this is where you start getting all your breakdowns and your illnesses, because the brain doesn't want the body to die. So the brain steps in and says, wait a minute, we're going to do something different here. And we're going to take our protein. And they take the protein and they start to digest their own proteins and turn it into fuel and to fuel the cells. This is why as a horse gets older, or as the old people in the mall get older because they're eating their strawberry shortcake and not their proteins, they start to see the top line go on the horse. They start to see the bellies form on the horse. They start to get diseases and breakdowns of suspensory ligaments because the protein's not there, because the horse is auto-digesting their own proteins just to stay alive. So the more sugar you feed on a daily basis, you're basically starving your horse, because a horse isn't supposed to have sugar every day. That's the most important thing about carbohydrate dependency. Now, there's a lot more details in here, and I don't want to get any more serious than that. We've got the whole school to go over. You can go there and learn the details. And I'll have future podcasts where I go into exactly what mitochondrial exhaustion is, what insulin resistance is, and where this all comes about. But the main thing I want to get across in this episode is carbohydrate dependency is you feeding your horse sugar every day in the form of grain, apples, carrots, sugar cubes, and everything else, plus feeding the best quality hay, which is high in starch, and having a lush pasture if you're lucky enough to have lush pasture. And you do that year round. And that is actually hurting your horse on the cellular level and causing them to consume their proteins. And this includes not only the connective tissue, it includes your hooves and skin. It also includes neurotransmitters. So if your horse has Cushing's disease, that's a neurotransmitter problem or neurodegenerative disease now. And you're replacing it with Pergolide, which is a dopamine replacer, which is a neurotransmitter. And neurotransmitters, all neurotransmitters are proteins. Enzymes are proteins, hormones are proteins, your immune system are proteins, or proteins and mixed with some fats. They're all integral. Your whole body is almost all protein with fats. The only purpose of sugar is to fuel the cells, keep it stored up as glycogen, and convert it into fat for storage for winter. That's the purpose of sugar. There's no other purpose to it. So if your horse is getting fatter and fatter but losing top line, it's because he's becoming protein deficient. It's probably because of carbohydrate dependency. All right, that's about 8 or 9 minutes of one subject, and I want you to just really ingest that and study it and understand why carbohydrate dependency in humans and horses is so detrimental to the normal ebb and flow of life. All right, Doc T, we're done here. We'll come back another day with another topic on nutrition, because it's a little bit in depth, and I want you to understand each little piece and then put them all together. Hey everyone, Doc T here. Thank you for listening to my content. Would you do me a huge favor? Would you please subscribe, comment, like, thumbs up, and give a star review? However it's presented to you, I want you to do that. There are 2 reasons. The first, of course, is to improve this product. This way I know what you like, what you don't like, what I can improve upon, what topics you want me to cover. But more importantly, it's also going to help others find me. And by doing that, you are now engaged in this mission of helping horses thrive in a human world. By you helping, we can reach others. And that I would be so grateful for. And remember, Go to thehorsesadvocate.com for updates on this information. Thehorsesadvocate.com. And again, thank you so much for being here. Doc T out.